I want to talk about a vital mistake that people make when they are in a marriage crisis and they want to save the relationship. And in fact, you might very well be making this mistake too. And it's an easy mistake to make because of the emotions that are involved. Usually during a marriage crisis, a relationship crisis, where you're having fights, where you're having arguments, where you're constantly getting at each other, and it seems unrelenting. What transpires is that you not only attack each other, but you try to destroy each other. You try to destroy each other's reputation, you try to destroy each other's character. You say things and do things that are very hurtful, that are very damaging, that hurts to the core. And if you are on the receiving end, you tend to want to defend yourself. You tend to want to give as good as you get. And sometimes the situation just unravels and degenerates into outright mudslinging, character assassinating. Now, what do you do? Particularly when you recognize that you've done things that you shouldn't have done, you've said things that you shouldn't have said. And similarly, your spouse, your husband, your wife, your boyfriend, girlfriend, partner has been on the warpath to totally decimate and destroy you. I have a couple of ideas and I want to share some of those ideas with you. I won't be able to share all of them, but if you are in a situation that you need some help, please feel free to contact me. There is a link someplace on this page that you can connect with me. If you're anything like Bob has been going through marriage issues up and down, in and out for a long time. Of recent time, it has gotten so terrible that he has decided that he is going to take a break. He needs a break for his mental sanity, and he also thinks that his physical well-being is under attack. That his wife literally put her hand on him and shove him about and push him and wants to slap him. And that's very unfortunately, because we don't condone any type of violence, whether verbal violence or physical violence. It shouldn't be done. But sometimes people get worked up, they get flooded, they get heated, they lose their cool, and in a spate of anger, they lash out not only verbally but physically. That we should really try to maintain and avoid any such thing. Now, what's the mistake that I've been alluding to? If you really want to save your marriage, usually people, as indicated, and maybe you're doing it now, and maybe your spouses try to defend their position. They try to show that they're right, to prove that they're right. And it's almost like one person said, if you're in a court of law and somebody says something, they need the evidence. And this evidence must be brought forward, they must be examined, and you need to make a decision based on the evidence. And if you don't have the evidence, then it's thrown out of court. Well, yes, that works quite well and very logical in the legal world. When it comes to the relationship world, the romantic world, the marital world, different things tend to occur. And each person has his or her own perspective. Each person defends his or her position as if they're facts. And a man's perception, what you need to understand, a man's perception is his reality and his feelings are his facts. So you think that you have an ironclad case based on the history of your partner, based on the things they have said, based on your interaction and engagement with that person. And you will tell your friends, you will tell your family, you will tell your colleagues or whoever wants to listen your case. You will present your case in such a way that it shows you in a wonderful light and almost demonizes the other party. And the other party does the similar thing. They would recount every single incident. They will recount the very facial expression that you had. They would even expand on and exaggerate things that you have done to show that you're not the type of person that they think you are, and that you're very terrible and a very dangerous person. The worst thing we can do is to try and defend ourselves. Because while they're painting you one way and you try to defend, every time you defend and every evidence and every point that you bring up, they would find some other contrasting, counteracting way to say, to nullify that and to prove their own point. So the major mistake is trying to paint the other person as the person who is an idiot, because names now start flowing back and forth. But if you really want, and it's deep in your heart, because most times, although usually it gets to a point when one person ultimately and finally give up, but whenever I see two people having a fight, while they are still in the mode of trying to get one another, get at one another, I think there is hope. Because what is happening is that the person deep within, in the core of their being, they actually are fighting for the relationship. It may not seem that way on the surface, but deep within, they want to be heard. They want to be respected. They want to be acknowledged. They want their emotional needs to be met. They are hurting. They are suffering. They are crying out. In fact, years ago I used to teach, they used to tell us in the classroom that the child that gives the most trouble is the child that needs the most help. And usually and recently they have found this out, that the people who are crying out, and if you have a child, even in parenting, the child who's throwing tantrums, who are saying negative things, who are trying to get at the parent and calling the parent need, is actually trying to connect, is their way of connecting. Obviously, it's not the best way, it's a counterproductive way. And similarly, when adults get in fight, they literally begin to use coping mechanisms that they would or they had used when they were children. They regress to the emotional childhood level, going back and forth and saying things that really hurt. But what that is saying is that I feel disconnected to you. And we have to look beyond the words, beyond the presenting behavior, and see the hurt. Because behind every behavior, behind every action, however terrible it is, are feelings and emotions. And behind that feeling and emotion is a need. But yeah, it's all well and good, Hilton, to be saying all these things. You deal with this, you have the knowledge, but you're not the person in the situation. Yes, I have had really terrible issues in my marriage too, and we have worked through them, thank God. One time I remember my wife and I, we were having what I sometimes call a glorified discussion, but it was a fight, and I was trying to say to her, look, you're saying these things about me, but my friends, my relatives, my colleagues, and I name a couple of individuals, they have really wonderful impressions of who I am. And she said something that really hit me right in the center of my consciousness. Bam! She said, but they don't live with you. And that changed things. I began to think about that. And one of the things I want you to take on board, yes, you're a wonderful person. Yes, you're an intelligent person. Yes, you've achieved a lot. Yes, you are kind. Yes, your friends, your relatives, your family have a wonderful image of you. And yes, you are that. However, your spouse experiences you differently. And there are lots of emotions tied up on that. And your spouse is assessing you based on their historical recent experience with you, and that's what they're engaging with. And hence, while we're thinking that whatever your spouse is saying is wrong, they are misconstruing your actions, I want you to remember something that I said earlier, that a man's perspective is his reality and his feelings are his facts. Now, and you should really ask, and I know the question that is on your mind. Okay, all wonderful theory, Hilton, so what do you do? I go through a series of stages and steps, outline them for you. And again, this video is not going to get into any depth of exactly how to go about each of them. And if you do really want some support, feel free to reach out to me. Number one, if you want your relationship back, if you really want to turn things around, the first thing that you need to do is to assess the relationship and where you are. And by assessing, you need to ask yourself some deep questions. First of all, can the marriage or relationship be saved? Because there are some relationships that cannot be saved. And in fact, there's and you want to, there are some types of relationships that should not be saved. A person who has addiction, or if there is a type of criminal activity that's going on, if there is constant chronic abuse, those relationships shouldn't be saved in that state. Which brings us to another point. Are you safe? Are you emotionally safe? I do have a checklist on how you can go about doing that. If you want that, please contact me. You need to decide, can the relationship be saved? Should it be saved? And then you need to ask yourself the question, which brings us to number 2, to make a decision. Are you willing? Are you willing to put in the time, the energy, the effort, the resources to save that relationship? Then we come to number 3. You could write this down. Number 3. There is a war going on here, an emotional battle between both of you. And there are bombs and bullets going back. And what we suggest during this is to have what is called a ceasefire. Is a time when warring nations decide during a certain period of time they're going to put their guns down and nobody's going to fire any shot or send any bombs or any such thing. They're going to sit down, cease hurting each other, shooting at each other, bombing each other, and they're going to try to broker some kind of deal. So with regards to your new relationship, what to recommend is that you or both of you, if you can, but even if your spouse doesn't agree with this, you're going to decide you're going to stop trying to decimate. You're going to stop being angry with that person. You're going to stop saying things and doing things that are damaging to the relationship and to the person. So ceasefire. Then the next, and I think this is number 4, is that you begin to look at repair. If you are in a battle, if you're disconnected in some way or you have been hurt. Things have been said that hurt, and things you have done and said are hurting your spouse. So you need to repair. You need, if you got in an accident, if you need to go to the hospital, they need to clean the wounds and take out if there are stuff that has stuck in you, the bullets, you need to pull them out. So you need some healing, you need to repair that. So that process is very important. And after you've healed, or even during the process, you will go to the next stage, which is the 5th stage, which is what I call reconstruction, and sometimes even rebuilding, because your relationship have been damaged, you have been bombed out. You're going to now rebuild a new relationship. So there are ways and things that you need to do to reconstruct, to restore, to regenerate the relationship. That not the one that you have is going to be a different one, an improved one, a one that is going to start from ground zero again. You need to rebuild, and there are many tips and strategies that you can use to rebuild your relationship. And then the final stage is, how are you going to sustain what you have rebuilt, reconstructed, restored? How are you going to sustain? So you have to put things in place to sustain it so that you don't degenerate into another all-out war again. How are you going to handle conflicts? How are you going to handle challenges? Because conflicts are inevitable and they're going to come again. What are you going to do? What is in place? And how are you going to be resilient? And how are you going to build a relationship that is divorce-proof, that is high-performing? If you need any support and help, again, I am available. You can contact me using any of the links that are on this page or someplace on this video, and I'll be happy to support you. Because if you think it is hopeless, I would like to suggest that you think again, because there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and except in certain instances, most relationships can be saved. Talk to you soon.